Hello, I'm Rob McNeilly, and it's a pleasure for me today to introduce Dr. Stephen Gilligan. And a lot of people know about Steve, and some people may not know as much as they'd like, but it's a pleasure to introduce him. And Steve, thank you so much for being willing to be part of this series and share your time and your experience. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Rob. My pleasure. Good to be here.
Yeah, great. So could you say something as a general introduction to who you are, what you're about, and how come you're doing the kind of weird work that you are doing? What's been your pathway so far?
Well, that's a big question. If you were talking about my professional pathway and how I got involved in hypnosis, maybe I should briefly say I'm sort of the product of a Irish Catholic alcoholic family growing up in San Francisco, coming of age in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. And I mention that because I think I spent a lot of time as a kid in an altered state, albeit altered states of dissociation, trying to get away from violence and figure things out, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I always wanted to be a psychologist. I mean, I knew from early age that I was going to be a therapist, and I sometimes say you just had to take one look at my family and realize somebody had to volunteer to be a therapist. But I did my undergraduate work at UC Santa Cruz in psychology, 1972 to 77, and I did my graduate work in psychology at Stanford from 77 to 82. While I was an undergraduate in 1974, one of my teachers was Gregory Bateson, and also got hooked up with Bandler and Grinder, who started NLP. And through that connection, at the ripe age of 19, I met Milton Erickson. And when I met Milton Erickson, it sort of was one of those, lifetime encounters where, the birds started singing and the angels came out, but it really touched something very, very deeply. And he was doing incredible psychotherapy. He was an incredible human being. And I felt that whatever he was doing felt like it was my calling and my path to be able to pursue it. Now, what was he doing? He was helping people to go into what we might call learning states. I think that's as good a phrase as any to describe trance. Mm-hmm. I think we, unfortunately, when we talk about hypnotic trance, we have this idea of somebody going into a state where they're programmed. One of the things you get from Ericksonian hypnosis is that it's a learning state. And there are two crucial things that I think that can occur by virtue of being in that trance learning state. First, you can let go of whatever you're hung up on. I could talk more about it, in a little bit, but I think what trance does is it helps you let go of what's called the orienting response, where you're just caught up in this narrowed sense of what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? You're in what I call neuromuscular lock. So you're stuck in the same state over and over and over. Yeah. And so, when we say relax in hypnosis or trance, we're trying to help people to unbind or unloosen from whatever fixed state that they're in. Secondly, and this is something I learned from Erickson, you have all sorts of interesting possibilities. You're really open to your world of creative imagination, what I call the world of infinite possibilities. You're really connected to a much wider array of choices, perspectives, resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I got that from Erickson almost immediately, and it's something that was almost 40 years ago. I never thought I'd say that, but it's true. Mm-hmm. And I've been, trying to follow that path in my own way since that time.
I remember you saying something that in being with Erickson, you found it difficult to go into trance and stay in the room, and that was some learning for you. I remember you saying that one time. And also one of the things that you learned from him was how comfortable Erickson was with his own weirdness. And you said, and that gave you a lot of permission. And from my perspective, I think you've taken that.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment. But seriously, I think that, you know, one of the things we could say that people struggle with in life is the way that they think, the way that they view things, the way that they know things is never quite normal, if you will. And there's always a significant gap between how somebody experiences the reality of who they are and how they sense who they think they should be, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so what Erickson, by modeling his own uniqueness, if you will, and encouraging both his students and his patients alike to celebrate and enjoy and realize their own unique way is the basis, really the primary basis for their happiness and also for any contribution that they would make. Mm-hmm. I think that it becomes a really vital point in psychotherapy, that we're really trying to help people to really be who they really are and to develop an acceptance of that, and from there a confidence and a curiosity about how that can be used as the gift for their own happiness and maybe also to make a contribution to others.
That's not a new concept. I mean, I've forgotten which of the ancient Greek philosophers said, dare to be yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is not unique to trance, of course. It's I think part of, I mean, anybody who does anything meaningful or extraordinary, I think, is doing just that. They're daring to be themselves. So I think trance allows you a safe place to temporarily set aside your social masks, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, Carl Jung, who's over here to my left, right above Erickson, you know, used to say that the first half of one's life belongs to other people because it's other people's voices and other people's ideas about who you should be or shouldn't be. That's sort of your prime directives, if you will. Mm-hmm. And he said that the second half of your life belongs to you. And you find your own voice and you find your own way. And I think trance is a really excellent tool for being able to support that.
Well, that brings me to one of the pivotal questions, which is, why would a therapist, counselor, psychiatrist, doctor want to learn about hypnosis and trance? And maybe you're starting to point to that, because, you know, we can say, you know, okay, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to dare to be myself. We can say that. But the next question is, okay, well, how do we do it?
Exactly. That's right. And that's the question that comes out of my client's mouth all the time. Mm-hmm. And I say, well, I'm glad you asked the question because you're in the right place. That's what I believe, that if we have a little luck, that we can be able to achieve here. Yes. Well, let me put it this way. You probably know who Hans Selye was.
I don't.
He's the guy that developed the idea of stress.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a Montreal physician who was just a medical resident in the 1930s. And, you know, as the standard tour with the medical residents, they would go around and be shown this patient and be told this patient has this diagnosis and this one has that diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And Selye said he couldn't help but notice they all look sick. and the general sense of their sickness was more impressive and intriguing to him, mm-hmm. because it suggested that there was a common underlying mechanism of sustained illness. Okay. And that's what he named as stress, which of course has entered the the popular language, both as a word and as an idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we humans suffer from, particularly modern humans, and it's growing more intense by the day, is we are unable to turn off what in neuropsychology is called the orienting response. This orienting response is whenever there is a novel stimuli, it behooves you to let go of anything you're imagining, narrow your attention, swivel your eyes, your head, orient externally, and ask the question, what's that? What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Every mammal has this,
Mm-hmm.
but most mammals, it doesn't last that long.
Mm-hmm.
After a little bit of time, they go back to, you see them take a deep breath, they go back to the relaxation response.
Mm-hmm.
When they go to the relaxation response, it is then and only then that healing occurs. The immune system, when you're in the orienting response, is suppressed because those are the two general defenses, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And if the orienting response is up, that tells you potential danger immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Allocate all your resources
Mm-hmm.
to checking this out.
It's a survival.
It's a survival. So it wasn't designed, people like Sapolsky at Stanford or Peter Levine, the psychotherapist who works a lot with trauma, say that this was designed to last a short period in nature.
Mm-hmm.
We humans have developed not only the capacity, but a sort of an institutionalized orientation to be 24/7 into the orienting response. Partly because we don't need an external stimulus to fire it off. We can imagine it.
Okay.
By simply saying, well, what if, this happens? What if that doesn't happen, et cetera, et cetera?
And there's probably some input there from media too, like if you don't get a new car or do this or do that or vote for this or that political party, then a catastrophe will happen. So it's become institutionalized in the media as well.
And the medium of the media, Marshall McLuhan, who was the sociologist, Canadian sociologist who in the 70s said, the medium is the message.
Yes.
And he said, television is a very cool medium. It's visual. The image is a little bit distant.
Mm.
So you have to amp people up to get them to keep watching TV. And so they show, for example, analysis of kids' TV programs that on average, once every 3 seconds, you've got the orienting response.
Okay.
And so what am I saying here?
Yeah.
I'm saying that when people are caught in stress, when people are caught in orienting to more negative things, when they're stuck in the same old, and these are the general bases for suffering, psychological and or physical suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was at the brief therapy conference in December in San Francisco,
Yep.
and I was on a panel of mindfulness, and the two of the presenters were saying 60 to 70% of the patients that show up in a medical doctor's office don't have a specific physical problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's stress related or psychologically related.
Yeah.
So trance, if we can strip it of the unfortunate booga, 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 the sort of thing where people think, I'm not going to go near hypnosis because I think somebody's going to control me. Somebody's going to put things in that I don't have, full knowledge of.
Yeah.
It's a way to relax and open to your creativity, to become calm, balanced, and curious once again.
Mm-hmm. So that's then that we would think that would be a very powerful incentive for people who are therapists, counsellors, psychiatrists, to learn about this, to learn about.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
I mean, but particularly nowadays, because the stress is just being amped up, in this ever increasing, let's do it. And the mediums, people on the cell phones, they're texting, they're watching TVs, are always on.
Yeah.
Those are all blocking relaxation and creative imagination.
Yep. So would it be going too far to say then that learning about hypnosis, learning about trance, learning about how to get out of this orienting response could be a major contribution to healing physically and psychologically?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, so one of the problems we sometimes have in the world of hypnosis is we tend to take all general healing processes and reduce them to hypnosis. And that would be, I think, inappropriate and unfair. But if what I was just saying, it's the presence of the relaxation response that allows healing to occur.
Okay.
So hypnotic trance is one way to safely, skillfully teach people how to be able to let go and relax.
Okay.
And that can engender the healing response.
Okay.
Now, I should add that from a therapy point of view, is that is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So what we hear often, I think, across all the different styles of hypnosis, there's a general consensus that hypnosis is not in and of itself a complete therapeutic approach.
Okay.
So it's a tool that can be used to be able to support whatever therapeutic approach that you're using, because we still have this additional challenge. Once we're in this creative state, that a trance induction can be able to open, what kind of therapeutic work can we do in it that can reorganize somebody's identity maps, that can be able to shift the way somebody is thinking about something or responding to something or feeling about something. And that's sort of the second piece of using trance as a therapeutic modality.
Yes. I mean, if you look at the mindfulness approach, it's as if mindfulness gets us into that first stage that you're speaking about, so that it's spoken about as if mindfulness is in itself healing. And I was thinking that, in a way, if we look at the Gestalt approach, if we can just complete the past, we'll be open to whatever's there, like what you're calling the infinite possibilities, so that even without any therapy following the trance, following that relaxation response, it seems to me that it is likely to be a lot of benefit for anyone to just get to that, even if there's not some specific. But you seem to be saying that there's another specific direction as well. It's necessary.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. There's an American writer, Ken Wilber, who you may know. He's sort of regarded as the most important writer in transpersonal psychology, and has been for 30 years or so. And one of the things he likes to say is that one of the most interesting meetings of our time is between Buddha and Freud.
Okay.
And of course, he's speaking metaphorically.
Sure.
But what he's talking about is the mindfulness-based approaches that the East has contributed, and the therapeutic approaches that the West has contributed. And in some ways, each really complete the other. And what the West, I think, really, one of the great values and contributions of the West is this emphasis that each individual life is unique and worthy of its own journey, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have that as developed a value in the East. I mean, we're speaking about generalities, but I think that's, you know, in psychotherapy represents that.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying, let's take a look at your life journey for a given individual, and how can you be able to live that life journey in an optimal way to maximize happiness, to maximize creativity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have as strong an emphasis on that in the Eastern approaches.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of the limitations of traditional therapy is they get too much in terms of ego analysis, or caught in the individual life, if you will. What happened in your past? What are you thinking about this, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So what things like meditation and mindfulness, and to some extent certain uses of trance, can do is it can open you to this more transpersonal. I don't know if that is the best word for everybody, but this sense of having a sense that you're not connected to a problematic life, that you're just present in the world with a sense of well-being.
Yes. So that instead of having that orienting response where, you know, am I about to be killed? There's a chance to see what's there to add to our aliveness and richness of experience.
And our sense of being a part of something much bigger than our individual perspective.
Yeah, so those two different complementary contributions. I'm reminded of a comment that Werner Erhard made. He said that it's a problem being half-arsed, whichever cheek is missing. So it's nice to have both cheeks to balance and to sit with any situation.
Well, you know, in the work that I do, that's a really a core principle. Not about being full-assed, but you know, one of the key the work that I'm doing now, I consider to be a sort of a post-Ericksonian approach. And this new book that I have out, it's called Generative Trance, just came out in November. Sort of elucidates what that might mean to have a post-Ericksonian approach. Well, one of the key principles is complementarity, which is the sense of how you can use trance to be able to train a sort of a both-and consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, one of the ideas in all of hypnosis is you've got two basic minds, or two different ways of approaching the world. And in hypnosis, we use the terms the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And it should be pointed out that there's no single unconscious mind, or no fixed singular conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at the history of the unconscious mind, you've got, you know, many different theories.
Mm-hmm. Freud
had one, you know, fundamentalist Christians have another, Jung had another, Erickson had another.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, who's right? You know, and to some extent, they're all correct, because we would see the unconscious as a sort of a quantum world of infinite possibilities. And this is what makes it so crucial to imagination. So one of the notions of a quantum field is an idea of a superposition, which is technically it's a mathematical wave equation that contains every possible state of something simultaneously. Mm-hmm. What does that mean practically when we're working with somebody? It means that when somebody presents and say, I'm depressed, for example, or I'm a trauma survivor, is that we realize that that's important to know, that they're caught up in that identity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's equally important to know that they have many different identities in them.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with problems is that we get trapped in the problem identity, we forget that we have contact to so many other possibilities. So the creative unconscious holds all these possibilities, but it's not complete. We say, well, it's infinite and eternal. It doesn't have time. But, I'm from California. I can tell you eternity is not all that it's cracked up to be. Because nothing ever happens.
Yes.
It's always just infinite possibilities.
Yes.
So the other world, the conscious mind, is the world of what I would call the classical world of specific reality. So in the classical world, I'm sitting here in Encinitas, California. I'm not down under in Australia. I'm not in Chicago. I'm here.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where things actually become real. Right. So for creativity, we need to be able to move back and forth across these worlds. Okay? The thing that happens when we get stressed or when we get traumatized or when we try too hard or when we get angry or when we become afraid is that the passageway between these two worlds gets slammed shut.
Yeah.
And it's from stress, or what I call neuromuscular lock.
Yeah.
So now you can't come up with, what could I do differently? You can't imagine, how could I approach this in a different way? How could I feel differently?
Because all there is what you've got, and that's how it always was and how it's always going to be.
That's what it feels like in the problem.
Yeah.
And you're always right. One of the incredible hypnotic properties of being angry is you're right when you're angry. It's a really a remarkable distortion in angry states. But so when we say relax, we're trying to open that door back up. And it's not to get people lost in some fantasy. It's to be able to open the conversation between the specific reality that somebody is in and the potential infinite number of ways that they can imagine it, be with it, connect with it, so forth and so on. So trance allows that. Now, I don't know if I have time to say.
Go.
I really want to suggest a very important difference between trance and hypnosis.
Yeah, good.
They say that trance is the psychobiologically necessary state that whenever your identity is dissolved or lost in some way, you go into that state. This could be voluntary. You could jump out of an airplane, hopefully with a parachute. Or you could, climb Mount Everest. You could go dancing or singing as a way to get out of your head, so to speak. Yeah. It could be involuntary and negative, such as you experience a death in the family, or you experience a birth in the family, or you change your relationship, or you lose a job or something. We could say all those are what we call identity events. And in these events, you're no longer able to occupy a particular fixed reality. It's gone.
Yes.
So you go into trance. You go into this quantum field, if you will. Now, the meaning of it and the way that it plays out and the way that it appears is a function of the human, social, psychological frames that are being held by which that trance appears in the world. So hypnotic trance is one type of trance.
Okay.
Trauma might be another type of trance. Meditation might be another type of trance. Okay. Now when we see that, we can begin to see what values different types of hypnotic trance have. And I always suggest there's three generations. In the first generation, traditional hypnosis is generally regarded that the client, the subject, their unconscious mind is an idiot and their conscious mind is an idiot.
Oh, okay.
So you got to sort of knock them out.
Okay.
So you see these rather, gross, authoritarian hypnotic inductions where you knock out the conscious mind. And then you program, like the person's a 2-year-old who needs to be told exactly what to do. You program the person's unconscious. From a therapeutic point of view, there's something severely lacking in that. What kind of idea does somebody carry about that in terms of their own capacity, their own intelligence, their own resources? I think it's rather low. Milton Erickson made this radical shift where he approached trance as natural. It's not something that is a function of suggestion. It's something that's in the nature of experience, in reverie or absorption or play. And so you want to tap into the natural roots of trance. And he also said equally radically that the unconscious, it can be remarkably intelligent. It has a tremendous wisdom to it. And that was really amazing. And, but I think that Erickson's held the same poor regard for the person's conscious mind. And so you develop these approaches that are still mainstream in Ericksonian work that I'm critical of, such as indirect communication, which I think is, from a relational point of view, is saying that the therapist is saying, listen, I know the truth about what you need. You can't handle it consciously. So I'm going to have to wrap my idea like a Trojan horse and sneak it by you for your own good. And I think that makes a lot of therapists hesitant to use it. And I think it makes some clients hesitant to open to it because they think it's this control game again. So Erickson, I think, and Erickson, I've been blessed with remarkable teachers, and Erickson's, at the top of the pantheon. So I say this with deep respect for the guy, but he was from another generation. So I think that you need to respect the potential intelligence of the patient or the client's conscious mind as much as their unconscious mind. And you can do a different type of trance that I call generative trance by inviting a person's conscious mind to be a co-participant in the trance work. And when doing that, what you're really helping a client to do is to learn how to have conversations between their conscious and their unconscious mind. How to have a friendly attitude, and most importantly, we're talking about the both and. I think it's only when you are able to occupy both sides of that equation, your conscious mind and your creative unconscious, that you become genuinely creative. You realize that the creativity is inside of me. I'm not some passive person that is being controlled by an external source, i.e. the hypnotist. But I'm somebody that's learning how to skillfully make a positive connection with myself. I think that is within each person's capacity to have some skill at doing this. Not everybody's a virtuoso. Not everybody wants to take it to advanced levels. But for the challenges that they're facing in their lives, I think it is within their capacity, and they've got a lot of motivation to learn how to do it.
Yes. Yeah, that's lovely. I remember Betty Erickson talking at one of the earlier congresses, saying that people say Erickson was like this or Erickson was like that, but you were probably there, reminded us that there were more than one Erickson. Maybe in your way, how he was when he was in his 20s was different from how he was in his 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. And my take on I only saw him really late in his life. I first met him in '77, and to me, he was not speaking so much then about forget the conscious and only trust your own conscious. There's somehow he was less of a dichotomy there. There was more an assumption that each had a contribution. That's just my take on it, but I don't know whether you have any comment about that from your observation.
Generally, yes, and I mean, I agree first with what I'm assuming you're talking about Mrs. Erickson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, any creative person goes through major epics,
yes,
if you will.
Yeah.
This photo that I have of Erickson up there he was in his prime, physical prime, if you will. Mm-hmm. And while I'm impressed, I don't know if I trust that guy.
Me too.
He was like a bulldozer coming at you. Yes. And he had an idea, and he was relentless.
Yeah.
The Dr. Erickson that you and I knew, partly, he was sort of defeated by time and by illness from a physical point of view, as we all are.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
If we live long enough.
Yeah.
But I think particularly him with his many physical maladies, he couldn't muscle it. He couldn't force it.
Yeah.
So he had to use what in the East they call chi or ki. That more subtle energy.
Okay.
And the dissociation, which was much more prominent. What I would, I think that the general term for what you're calling about that separation of powers is dissociation.
Yes.
Where you've got the conscious mind, then you've got the unconscious. Mm-hmm. I think it was moving to a more aesthetic wholeness, if you will.
Yes.
But still, if there was one criticism that I would make of Erickson, and again, it was almost impossible for anybody. I mean, he did some impossible things, but the thing that I would take a little bit further is this notion of the creative intelligence of the conscious mind.
Okay.
Now, here's where, by the way, where something like mindfulness is a beautiful example of. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the generative trance work that I'm doing now, mindfulness plays a really big part. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, Michael Yapko, who you mentioned, is giving another one of these interviews.
Yeah.
And on one of these, the previous conferences, webinar conferences, he was giving a very nice talk. I can't remember the exact title. Why is hypnosis still the crazy cousin? Was that it?
He wants to invite on the picnic, yes.
That's right. And he was lamenting, as many of us who have been doing trance as our vocational work, that there has been not quite the level of acceptance as we would hope in terms of, across the field in psychotherapy or medicine. Mm-hmm. And he was identifying, I can't remember, a number of reasons, raising a number of possible reasons. Mm-hmm. The thing he didn't mention was that hypnosis still carries, both for professionals and for lay people, this idea of one person controlling another.
Yeah.
And it scares a lot of people away, as it should.
Yeah.
From a therapeutic point of view, I think that's the problem, not the solution.
Yeah.
Is it listening to somebody else's ideas? Mm-hmm. Mindfulness doesn't carry that at all. Mm. And so it's really interesting, and it's, you know, one of the really positive things with generally with psychotherapy becoming more conservative and more institutionalized over the past 10 or 15 years. To me, one of the real pleasant surprises has been the acceptance of mindfulness, and even like cognitive behavior therapy,
Yeah.
you know, has opened their arms to it, and I'm thrilled by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do people think of when they think about mindfulness that they don't think about when they think about hypnosis? I think it's that.
Yeah.
So the generative trance work is really trying to approach uh, trance with a spirit of mindfulness. But as we were saying earlier when I said Buddha, Freud, I think that in the generative trance work, you can use these therapeutic tools that the West carries, that the traditions of mindfulness, at least up to this point, don't have as much of sophisticated development of.
Yes. Yes. I gave a talk to some medical students in Hobart here in Australia. I wanted to speak about hypnosis, but you know, there's no real exposure to it. So the way I tried to introduce it was to talk about it. They know about mindfulness. Was to talk about it as mindfulness with a GPS. So to have mindfulness, but some kind of direction.
That's right.
Trying to.
Yeah, or you might say to hold a specific intention.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that they're not mutually exclusive.
Oh, sure. Sure.
You know, and by the way, if you say, I mean, mindfulness, we're talking about the orienting response,
Yes.
being highly narrowed attention.
Yes.
You know, like the foveal vision.
Yes.
Only can sample 1 degree out of 360 degrees at a given moment. That's amazingly narrow.
Yes.
It's got, you know, increased breathing and heart rate and more verbal sort of thing. So what we're doing in mindfulness is we're opening this content-free, subtle field of non-reactive awareness.
Yes. Yes.
And, you know, sometimes I've heard a lot of people say, what do you mean content-free? You know, is it possible to have awareness without content? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. And if we open that as a space, what it allows us to do with our psychological experience, whether it be a trauma, whether it be a struggle that we're engaged in or a difficult challenge, we can be with it without becoming it.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And that we hear that in hypnosis, meditation, a lot of EMDR, this key suggestion, just let it happen.
Yes. Yes.
You know, so we can be with it, but we're not reacting, we're not identifying,
Yes.
which is where the problem is created.
So we can accept it, we can witness it, but we don't have to react to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we can respond.
I
So that's
love
the notion of intention.
Oh, yes.
Is that we can be with it, we can respond to it, but we're not shut down in reaction as we do so.
Yes. One of my favorite translations of one of Lao Tzu's chapters is, knowing nothing needs to be done is the place we begin to move from.
That's right. Well, you know, my wife is Chinese.
Uh-huh.
So I spend at least 3 months in China every year.
Okay.
So I think Milton Erickson's predecessor was Lao Tzu.
I've got a theory that the Bering Strait used to be connected, so that somehow there was some of the Chinese went across and became part of the North American Indian, and Erickson's. That's my story about that.
Well, I completely agree. I mean, actually, Not so much the Han Chinese, but the Tibet.
Uh-huh.
But that's a different, maybe off-camera conversation.
Okay. Yes. So there are these two elements that you're speaking about. There's the general state where we are open to witness instead of reacting, to be with instead of reacting. And then there is the therapy, the psychotherapeutic process, which in your generative trance work is the kind of next step. It's what follows, creating the context.
That's right.
To allow some specific. So, can you say something more about that? About the specifics? What that next step might be?
Well, it all depends on the challenge. But let's say that you're caught up in a trauma. Well, I think there's a lot of great work on trauma that's been done in the last 10 or 15 years, and both things like EMDR or somatic experiencing by Peter Levine, I think could say that PTSD is unassimilated or unintegrated experience.
Mm-hmm.
That it's an experiential event, by definition of trauma, that was so severe or so overwhelming that virtually nobody would be able to stay open and present with that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So as an act of self-love and self-protection, you have to go into lockdown.
Yeah.
So now every time you either generally relax or you connect to any part of that experience again, here comes the traumatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if the goal of therapy would be to integrate a trauma, then you first need to get a base in which you stay connected to yourself. I call that somatic centering,
mm-hmm.
where you open a space to resources beyond the problem. I call that what I call a creative field or generative field. And then you begin to engage with whatever this experience is. How do you see yourself in that experience? How do you titrate it? How do you begin to breathe it through in a way that you can begin to assimilate?
Yeah.
How can you notice the beliefs that you may have developed in that? And how can you begin to sense, I can bring a different belief about myself now into this experience? Mm-hmm. These would be, in some ways, standard parts of many different therapeutic approaches mm-hmm. to dealing with trauma. What the trance would allow you to do is to stay present, is to stay connected to resources, and to be in this, I think, more relaxed, attuned state so that you can think more clearly about the sort of the nuts and bolts about how do I make this important change, that whatever is the focus of therapy.
And
sorry, there's one other thing, which is when we're facing a difficult choice point, whether it's trauma or say somebody's caught in a relational struggle, they're having trouble in their marriage, we need at many points in our life to be able to open many new choice points. Mm-hmm. Say, I'm at a place now where the way I've approached it in the past doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I've got to come up with something new. So when we get to that relaxed, open, attuned trance state, we can now introduce a question. What are 3 or 4 different ways that I can be able to think about this, that I can respond to this? Mm-hmm. So you might say it sort of opens the pathways into divergent thinking, which, a lot of people in creativity research say that is one of the core principles of creativity. Yeah. So from any place you can radiate out.
Yes, and when you say radiate out, it's not only in your thinking, but actually in your seeing. You can actually get a wider perspective and see things which were we were literally blind to before.
Exactly. And as I say, that's what I mean by the neuromuscular lock,
Yes, yes,
or the orienting response. The eyeballs harden.
yes, yes.
I practiced, as I think you know, the martial art of Aikido for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And Aikido is remarkably identical in its structure to Milton Erickson's work. I was absolutely astonished.
Okay.
And in Aikido, there's a lot of training to what we call soft eyes, or even you imagine like your eyeballs are like radiant suns. I know that may sound a little strange, but it's not done as a dissociational esoteric practice, because you're doing it in a context where somebody's coming at you with the intent to hurt you. So you have to stay very, very present to what's going on.
Yeah.
And the notion is basically the mind does two things. It either does this or it does this.
Yeah.
And so when you're caught in a problem, this is happening.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that something like this can begin to happen in attention.
Yes. Yeah. There's that cliche which says that the mind, like a parachute, works best when it's open. Cliche, but like all cliches, I guess they have something to contribute. Yeah, and I guess when there is that, when that becomes that, then all kinds of things can appear, and ideas, resources, options.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is to me, it's a learned response. I mean, sometimes I talk about it with my students and also with clients, saying that each of us has this biological, ethical, moral challenge to answer the question, how do I protect the life that has been given to me? You've been given this gift of a human life, and as the Buddhists like to say, you've hit the jackpot,
Okay.
But it's a precious, precious gift that you've been given.
Yes.
So biologically, spiritually, morally, we're called to protect it. So instinctually, protection looks like this.
Yes.
Or fight, flight, freeze, or fold, the 4 F's.
Yes, yes.
But if you look at that as a lifestyle pattern of protection, it actually makes you less safe.
Yes.
If you walk around angry or defensive or scared, you're actually, first of all, you're going to be more of a target.
Yeah, you're going to get killed.
You're going to get killed.
You protect your life enough, it's going to kill you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so what we're really looking to explore to protect your life, it actually probably is in your best interest to learn how to stay open.
Okay.
And it's a special type of staying open. It's being centered. It's being tuned in, but it's not being locked on any particular detail.
Yes, yes.
So this is what we can use as a way to help clients be able to heal, to transform, to change. But it's also a set of principles that people can learn in terms of how to walk around in the world. And it's what I'd say is another limitation in the traditional idea of hypnosis, is something that requires that you go inside and close your eyes and go down.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that, if that is a requirement, it has limited value. Because if you're in the middle of an argument, and you have to say, hold that thought,
yes.
I need to close my eyes and do arm levitation or something.
If you're on the mat and someone with Aikido, and so
yeah, or driving your car, you don't want that type of auto hypnosis.
No, not at all. No. Yeah. So
this is why I really think that the trance should be distinguished from hypnosis.
Okay. Yeah.
And that we should be thinking about and exploring all the different ways that we could integrate trance into creative consciousness in a fluid way so that people can make use of their creative consciousness in many different contexts of their life.
Okay. So could you say something then, some people will and some people might not know about your training. You know, you've been running trance camps for some number of years now. Could you say something about that and how people could find out about it?
Well, the website is www.stephengilligan.com. And that's www.stephengilligan.com. Operators are standing by.
Stephen's got a PH in it too, so that.
That's right. That's St. Stephen.
Yeah.
If people are interested in in exploring any of these ideas or any of this work, that's really the place to go.
Okay.
Because we've got all sorts. We've got interviews, and you can see my Vita, you can see my workshop schedule, so forth and so on. I've been teaching the work for a long time, close to 40 years.
Yeah.
And I travel all over the world. I even get down under, usually every 2 years.
Yeah.
So I teach a lot. I live here in the San Diego area in Encinitas, California. Mm-hmm. Every summer in July, I do a 3-week generative trance training. It's sort of earned the nickname of Trance Camp because students come. They say, this is just, at least for the Americans, I don't know if it's true for Australians or anybody else, but so this reminds me of going to summer camp as a kid.
Okay.
Where you just have all this fun and go swimming and do all this learning at the same time. So that's sort of the granddaddy, if you will. We have a really nice international group. You can come one week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And because I travel around, we usually get people from many different countries. Like a year ago, I think we had 50 people, and we had 19 different countries.
Oh my goodness!
So it's a veritable Tower of Babel, if you will.
Yeah.
But so thank you and I've got 8 books, and this is the most recent, Generative Trance. You can find out about those books online. That one's also, you can get it from ebook on Amazon. But as I say, what we've been talking about today, most of it is in that recent book, The Generative Trance, The Experience of Creative Flow, which is how to shift from this neuromuscular lock of thinking with tension and stress to thinking the way that any really creative person thinks in a state of flow. So that they can be present, they can be able to be connected, but they're also open to this X factor, if you will, and they can make use of the best of both worlds, so to speak.
And people going to your website also have a chance to purchase recordings of previous Trance Camp work or subscribe to your newsletter, and I'd recommend that people do that. I think it's such a...
Yeah, you can get on the newsletter and so forth. I try not to send too many ads out, but it just keeps you informed.
Yeah. So could you say something in summary, Steve, then, of what we've been talking about?
Well, creative consciousness, I think, is really the core principle that guides all this work. And when we are in therapy, when we're working with people in any sort of place where they need new choices, they need to connect with creative consciousness. So what I've been saying is that trance is one way by which people can do it. It's not the only way. It's not the one true way. But it's something that has been worked out, I think, over many generations that has tremendous, tremendous value for people. Mm-hmm. And, the second thing I've been saying is that we shouldn't get a rigid idea about what hypnosis is. because it's a tradition that is in evolution.
Okay.
And for today, we need traditions that honor people's own capacity to make their own decisions, to change their own lives. That wasn't the case 50 years ago.
Yeah.
50 years ago, it was Father knows best. So I hope that when people are listening or exploring this work, that they can get value in that regard to help themselves.
Yes.
And to help others that they work with know that they have this creative capacity to get through the most challenging of problems and to live life in a way that brings a lot of happiness and a lot of positive contribution to others. So that's why I do the work, and I hope that comes across in what we're talking today.
You know, I think the way you speak about it, Steve, you embody that. You know, it shows in how you speak and who you are. So I think there's a very definite experience that anyone viewing this or listening to this can't help but pick up.
Mm.
So it's marvelous to have this opportunity to let more people know about the possibilities that can come from this work, and so appreciative of your generosity and your time with your busy life, and to share your experience. It's a delicious gift. So thank you so very much for doing that.
Well, as they say in Mandarin, biakachi. That means you're welcome.
Okay.
I know in Chinese, I know wa ai ni dueboche and biakachi. I love you and I'm sorry and you're welcome.
There's the only Chinese word I know is, and I'm not sure whether it's Mandarin, is 谢谢.
谢谢.
谢谢. Which is thank you.
Thank you. That's right. Thank you too, Rob. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Will we stop there?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.